I was gonna say, yeah, Mark, do you want to do a recording? Okay, that's excellent. I would forget. That'd be the thing, right? So
that's why I wanted to start it, so I wouldn't forget.
Get it covered. So, oh, that's great. All right, we'll get things going, and then whoever can join, we can help fill in the gaps. We have some good stuff to share today, and then we figure there hopefully should be some good time at the end here, which either means that we'll have lots of time to sort of talk through any questions there may or may not have. And then otherwise, of course, we get extra time at the end, people get time back. That's always great too, right? So either way, it'd be great to kind of catch up with all of you and talk about kind of what we're working on and what's coming. So a lot of updates today. So thank you again for coming. Today's schedule, you can sort of see on the opening slide here. There's just some quick things we want to talk about in terms of service, just news and updates, of course. Kind of reflect and talk about the new Wist.edu redesign, which if those of you have seen it, we'll talk about those a little bit, a few details here. A little bit of the Google Analytics for transition and what that means for all of you. Having a little bit more talk about other campus resources, of course, and what else is coming with the new Gutenberg editing option. So with that, I'm gonna jump back and forth. And Mark, if you forget something, please just jump in and cut me off. That's the way to do it. So in any case, for those that, of course, all of you, I think pretty much have met all of us, but just so in case you haven't, my name is Al Nemec. I'm Service Web Operations Manager here at CALS IT, and of course, Mark Millard, who is our web services developer as well. So again, for those of you who haven't already tried to reach out to us, we try to be as responsive as we can on Teams and stuff, but we always recommend folks try to reach out to us using the web support email address, because that goes to our ticket system. It means we both get the tickets and we can see things, and really helps out as we try to keep things as orderly as we can. So to jump in here, we've got some news, service, and updates here. Just in general, there's been a lot of work on the CALS theme as of late. So we've been doing a lot of things working towards a new CALS website theme. This is something we're going to make more widespread and available to everybody as that gets a little bit more full featured. We're working on a couple of key components, which we'll talk about. And what that means for everybody here. And the general idea with the new theme is it's going to do a whole bunch of things in keeping with not only kind of improving the design and look and feel for everything and keeping things up to date with not only web standards and web trends, but also with maybe any change that happen at the campus level of branding, things like that. There should be a lot of also improvements to accessibility, performance, you name it. And then of course, lastly, my favorite, which is there's a lot of new things that we're doing kind of that straddles both the new theme as well as the old theme in terms of the ways to publish, which is, I think, probably the bigger component that matters to all of you, is how does that work and what is that going to be? So we will definitely spend some time on that today a little bit as we go. We're continuing things on the infrastructure side. And Mark, I don't know if you wanted to cover some of this at all, but I know we're going through a full plugin audit to make sure that we have everything up to speed with where it should be, and anything that needs to be changed or removed, we do so. For those that aren't familiar, the plugins are effectively these modular pieces of functionality we make available to within WordPress, and those plugins matter a great deal depending on what your site is using. So there are folks that utilize forms, for example, is one that's commonly brought up. And that one we, of course, like to make sure is working well for everybody. But there's some sort of specific ones too that particular sites will take advantage of. So it's really important that we kind of keep an eye on that. There are some code level things as well, just for those that may be curious. We like to make sure things are always up to date. We do get this question from time to time. People are sort of like, hey, are you guys on top of, making sure things are up to date and not going to be hackable or defaceable or things of that nature? And that is the answer to that is, of course, yes. We work very, very closely with Do-It and others as well to kind of make sure that updates and things are applied in a very timely manner. So as we're working towards the end of the summer, getting PHP 8 involved, PHP 8 applied, I should say, and of course, working towards the latest version of WordPress as well. We're on just one release behind as we're testing that new big release and moving that forward. So we have some general release update information. Most of these releases, by the way, from the code level, don't tend to make a big impact on, I think, a lot of content day-to-day work, but when and if they do, we would absolutely be sending that out in the communication to all of you, so you would be aware of what's happening there. In general, I think it's just something that we like to just keep on top of, so you don't have to worry about it, right? So that's the hope, is that you can focus on what you need to do, which is the more important thing, frankly, which is the content, the thing the user actually sees. And then there's still planning for next webinar. We looked at the summer schedule and it through a lot of things going on and different things that are happening with projects. It made a lot more sense for us to think that we could kind of space these out a little bit and plan for one sort of kicking off towards the end of summer, maybe start of fall. And if we see if that works well for everybody, obviously in the meantime, if there are big questions or changes, you should still keep an eye out for, you know, things like emails from us, or of course can reach out to us. That is something that we want to do. So we want to make sure these things are sort of timed right, so they're valuable enough, people get enough out of them, and they can stay up to date with things without it necessarily being something that we're doing, you know, every week or every month, so to speak. So any big thoughts or questions on any of that? Or Mark, anything you think I missed you want to add?
I guess I would just add one bit about PHP 8 in that, like, you know, typically like as Al said, the WordPress, you know, we were able to test those really well. The PHP 8 is a pretty big upgrade for PHP. And it's not an issue for WordPress core. That, you know, it's well tested. The thing we wanted to mention for folks, you know, we've got a lot of plugins on, you know, some of you or you know, we've got some 200 some odd plugins, and, you know, we make those available on request to specific site owners, but, you know, we were unable to fully support those, right? So it's really going to come down to, does your plugin developer have they made sure that their plugin is updated and able to handle PHP 8? So we just wanted to highlight that's coming. If you know you have if you have a plugin that you use that is particularly important, you can jump out to the WordPress.org site. That's where they'll put all their release notes for plugins. If you have we could peek for you. We just wanted to mention that because you know, there could be some PHP 8's a big change, and there could be some breaking changes. Mostly, again, if like a plugin vendor hasn't updated their plugin for a couple of years and they don't touch it, that's when there could be an issue. So we just kind of want to sort of like put that out there and make sure folks are aware. So
yeah, that's a great point. So especially for sites that we identify are using maybe one of those plugins that is not being properly updated to maintain that compatibility, that'd be something we definitely reach out and work with site owners about. I think that is a general question that comes up is, oh, would you just turn it off? It's like, well, unless it's causing a critical, you know, issue or something that's an imminent threat to your site, we want to work with you and make sure that we find out either a suitable replacement or what needs to be done to make sure that that is accommodated, so you don't suddenly just lose any sort of functionality you might think you'd be using on a normal day-to-day basis. Great. Good. Okay, we've jumped in. If there's any questions, feel free to jump in or throw something in chat. I'm gonna kind of quickly talk to. I'm wondering. I'm hoping some of you probably have seen. I wouldn't say it's maybe a dramatic redesign, but there was a nice, I'd say, visual update to WISC.edu. So for those that are aware, that this is something that the University Marketing Group had been working towards, and they had applied some updates here. Is there anyone here? I mean, would you guys, I don't know if you guys have seen it. Would you like me to give you a brief little tour on some of the updates that we've noted? We'd be happy to do that. We kind of talk about it. And the reason we want to talk about this is because, you know, we definitely pay a lot of attention here to the things that university marketing is doing, because we like to help make sure that both the CALS digital brand online, as well as the tools that are available are, you know, in keeping with what the campus has, as well as sort of the trends of things of that nature. So we want to make sure that all of you have the best tools as well to do this sort of stuff. So if you can see my desktop, for example, this is the update to WISC.edu. This is taking advantage of a couple of things. Now, number one, you probably already noticed right off the bat, the video background header space here with some nice B-roll of aerial footage of campus. So this has become a thing that you've seen probably time and time again on a few other sites, like Johns Hopkins University, for example, has had a sort of like a hero space like this with the video. This is something that we actually technically have available right now in the current sort of standard theme that a lot of folks have, the 2015 theme. And we're working on a brand new version of it, working towards with the new version 4 of the CALS theme that will be coming out for more folks here soon. And the idea being is that we want to be conscientious of having this available for folks that want to do this, but we understand very well that this is the kind of content, this sort of video feature like this, that requires quite an editorial careful approach in sort of looking at this sort of thing. And because you could imagine if this video wasn't as maybe subtly moving and it was all jerky or had other things or relied on audio, all the things we don't want to include by default, you know, that would be a difficult thing to apply, right? There's a lot of care taken with this video that's probably spent a lot of time and I'm sure a lot of energy to make sure that it worked well with contrast with its header here with the navigation, and that it had a consistent size so that it wouldn't inhibit page load, but still, you know, show up pretty quickly and still have some interest, right? So this is the kind of thing that I could imagine we're talking about this more. Nicole, this is something that I know that Mike and I and Mark have talked about just sort of casually a little bit, just because we know that he's been very, he's a very good videographer and working through a couple of pieces that he's been working on and trying to see how much of those may take advantage of this. So this is something we're keeping an eye out for and wanting to provide some solution that others can utilize that'll be really easy to apply, but still kind of fit all of those sort of, you know, nuance things that we want to make sure a video like that would apply to. Other things that are in this design refresh, by the way, include, you know, some more regular use of sort of content intro transitions, things where as you move the content down, it sort of slides into place. Those are things that we have working towards in the next theme as well. So those are the kind of things that will become available, and we're going to make some of those options will be nice and nice and available here to toggle off and on. But some of them we want to make sure they feel it's just sort of automatic, so it's not sort of a thing you have to do all the time with that sort of thing. The careful thing that we really want to watch out for is making sure that these sort of changes like introduction animation, things like the video at the top, that we abide by accessibility rules as well. So when users have a system rule set up on their computer that says, I don't want extra motion is a problem for me, that is something that does not then appear for those folks. So there's some work going into that, but that is something that's coming as well. A couple of things we noticed about the design, a couple of different module changes to UI components. They also have a little bit of a switch. If you remember typography wise, what they were seeing on the last version where they used kind of Verlag for a heading, and then in some cases, Georgia for a body font. Now it's sort of flipped. They have Verlag for a paragraph / body font in a lot of cases, and something in this case, I believe it's Merriweather, in fact, as well. So yeah, so we're looking at how we want to maybe incorporate some of these style and font pairings into the next version into some of these new CALS components as well, for those that are going to try to take advantage of some of the look and feel where it will work well with what we're trying to do in CALS here. But some of these things are also things we've actually we saw with, you know, kind of a smile, because it's like, oh yeah, we were just doing that, or we already have that now. Something like the parallax effect background here with the text and call to actions overlaid. So some very nice things here. I think the design refresh is nice, and some of these things are great to talk about. If there's other things that anyone here has observed that they really like within what WSTU's done, is wondering whether or not they can do it on their site. You know, either now is a good time to bring it up, or we can certainly, you know, reach out to us at some point. We can kind of talk about those sort of things and see how to make that popular. Just pulling up chat here, they didn't have it open right away. And yeah, Nicole, I see, yeah, videos become more and more important for sure. I think, you know, I don't know how much others maybe as well, but I know Mike King, right, has done quite a bit. So I think it's incredibly impactful when done well. So that's why we definitely want to make sure that's accommodated and available as well. Any other thoughts, questions around the WSTU redesign and what that might mean? All right. Hearing none, I'm going to jump in to the next thing here. So why don't you take it away?
All right, let me. Yeah, in fact, these are slides, so I think you can just keep driving if you want. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say either way, whatever works.
Because I don't have any demo. I don't think so. Yeah, we just wanted to highlight a transition that's coming up. Sorry, my screen is. There we go. So Google's we've mentioned this in a couple of our newsletters, as well as a couple of the recent our web conferences, that Google is in the middle of a pretty large transition from their universal analytics properties to what they're calling GA4, Google Analytics 4. So it's essentially like a brand new version of Google. And what really is happening here, so the replacement date, so the target date is July 1st, 2023. So pretty much about a year out. What this is requiring of folks that are using Google Analytics currently is they need to create a new Google Analytics 4 property that will replace their current UA4. Oh, sorry, could you go back one slide? There you go, thanks. Yeah, so it'll basically require a replacement of that tracking code. Now at this point, you'll be able to view reports, any UA properties that you have through July 1st, 2023. Google hasn't yet provided a date in which your existing UA property will no longer be available, but they have a mechanism for exporting data to something else that could live on, and you'll continue at least through beyond July 1st, 2023. So July 1st is the date at which the old UA property will stop collecting data, basically. So that's just sort of the important thing. Now I've got a couple of resources here. Google provide a nice link that explains the transition and what you need to do to transition over. And they also provide a nice make the switch. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight is our friends over at WhiskWeb and KB are doing a session actually this afternoon, and we had this in our newsletter, so hopefully you saw it a couple weeks ago. So they're doing actually a session particularly on Google Analytics, this transition this afternoon from 2 to 4. And so if you want the link, we could either paste it in the chat if you want to attend this afternoon, or just look at our newsletter for Monday from eCals. Actually, you could find the announcement in there. We put that in there. So that's kind of what's happening. And then the next slide kind of talks about, okay, what do you need to do? If we could have the next slide. Great, thank you. Yeah, so what should you do? Well, there's a couple things. First, you need to determine if you're even using Google Analytics. Some of our sites aren't. So that's the first determination. If you're not utilizing Google Analytics, if you're using something else, Hotjar, something entirely different for analytics, this isn't going to apply to you. If you suspect you're using Google Analytics, or you are, next thing is determine, okay, do you have the old UA style, or do you actually, starting about October 2020, if you had created your Google Analytics property and measurement ID around that time, you would have likely already created a new GA4 type. So some of you probably will already be okay. So determining which you have, you can check WordPress and Google Analytics, and I have a couple screenshots in a minute to show you that. You can determine what measurement ID you're using. Basically, then if you have the UA property ID, then you can use those resources to work through creating the new GA4 property, getting that linked into your WordPress site, and then it will start collecting data. So Google's recommending you can go ahead and start this transition anytime. So you can have the two properties side by side within your Google Analytics account. So you can have your UA, you can go ahead and set up your GA4, and then once you add the new GA4 to your site, then it'll start collecting data on that side. Okay, and so that's a kind of, right here's the format. Basically, it's pretty obvious. The old format starts with a UA dash, and the new format starts with a G dash. Okay, and then on the next slide. So just a couple things to keep in mind. We'll kind of keep reminding you. We'll be working with folks. We'll be available to answer questions. So by and large, most of our sites, a site administrator has set these up, so they have Google Analytics set up in their own account. We do have the small selection of our websites that we have managed the Google Analytics properties, so most of our CALS administration sites. So we will be taking the lead on that and working on the transition for those well in advance of July 1st. So if you do have any questions, though, certainly reach out to us at websupport@cals.wisc. So I've got just a few screenshots here to kind of help orient folks that might have questions. So the first way to kind of check is if you know you have a Google Analytics account, just go to analytics.google.com, log in with the Google account that you have that set up with. You'll actually see right across the very top. They have a big banner for those folks. If your property is the old UA property, they'll kind of let you know right there. And they have a nice button to say, let's go. And they help you create that new GA4 property and at least get that set up, okay? So that's the first way to check. Also in Google, on the next slide, I can just show you, like I have a little sandbox. It just basically shows for a given account on the left there, the analytics sandbox, and then you'll see the two properties, right? So one is the old UA property, and then the other one is the new one. So you can see I have those two set up, and then all you have to do when you're ready is grab that new GA4 measurement ID and then pop it over into your WordPress site to have that start collecting data. So on the WordPress side, on the next slide, the places, now this is going to vary. It's going to vary based on what theme you're using or whether you're using a third-party plugin to sort of track your Google Analytics. But if you're using the CALS 2015 or our new CALS theme, although most of you won't be using our new theme yet, but we have those built into the theme in the appearance customize, and there's an analytics navigation menu. Once you click in there, so that's the middle, and then basically there's a box, an input box, so you can just paste in that Google, but you can check there, and if you see a UA measurement ID, then that's definitely, you know, that's your cue of like, okay, I'm using the old one, I need to kind of go work through this transition. WhiskWeb, basically, if you're using the WhiskWeb theme, a few folks on our platform are, it actually is the same, it's in the same place. It's in the appearance customize menu as well. If you happen to be using a plugin like Monster Insights, or there's a whole number of third-party plugins, basically just you'd navigate, and if you've gone to the trouble setting that up, then you'll know exactly where to go. But you basically go into the plugin settings. Usually there's a similar idea. There's a text box where you'll find that code to set that up. So that's kind of how you can check it and also change it on the WordPress side. Okay, so I'll pause there. I saw a few things in the chat, but are there any questions about that? Looks like Al kind of already answered some, so that's great. Are there any other questions about this Google Analytics stuff?
Hey, Mark and Al.
Yeah.
This is Nicole. I'm just wondering, like, so if I go in and I get my data quarterly, and like July 1st is the beginning of a new quarter, the way I do things, like there will be no interruption to my data and the kind of data that I want and get. Does that sound right?
I would say the data collection will be uninterrupted. I think what's probably important though for you, especially Nicole, is that the interface, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong this, but I believe the interface for Google, once you are using GA4, will be a little different. So like the left-hand menu. Yeah, I would say it's simpler, but it is different.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that too. I feel like they've definitely improved. It's less complicated. It still collects the same data. You just might have to learn how to get to the data that you usually get to. There'll be a slightly different way to do that.
Yeah, I think the mention of, as Mark most mentioned, the WhiskWeb training on some of the GA4 stuff as well is helpful. I'd say too, though, if folks either aren't able to see that, whether I think it's going to be recorded, but either see that live or see it recorded, or if it still leaves you with a lot of questions too, we could also plan to really have a good, sort of just demo or like a walkthrough of actually using Google Analytics as one of the part of these. We've been using the Gutenberg blocks a lot for topics lately, just because that is sort of the big thing that's changing a lot. But there are maybe some other aspects that people might be really interested to see, so they can understand if what they're doing on their website is having an impact on whatever their goal is, right? If they're communicating and people are seeing it, or people are then taking certain action based on that.
So Al, I think in the past you helped for the eCALS newsletter to get the closest kind of data we could possibly get to kind of like click-throughs and stuff like that. You helped set up this special report that I go to every quarter to get certain data. I'm guessing that's going to disappear because you built that special for me. And I feel like it's probably going to get wiped out. We might need to reset that up. Hopefully it won't take that long. I don't know.
That's a great question. Actually, I don't even know the answer to that. I think there's something we would have to definitely look at. I think when it comes to transitioning the eCALs over to GA4, let's plan on connecting on that and maybe having a couple of tests with that so we can figure out if that, what sort of impact that is going to have. You're right, because it's possible that those reports that Google will be like, sorry, you have to remake those. We're not sure off the top though, for sure.
Yeah, I guess like the least I could do is take a screenshot of it so I know what all is there, and hopefully that will remind us what we were doing the first time if we have to set it back up again.
Yeah, that's a good.
And the new one definitely has a report builder, so we should, at the very least, if they don't transfer or import, we can certainly rebuild that again.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Excellent. Mark, did you want me to cover this list of stuff as well, or do you have some more you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I'm done with Google Analytics, but we just wanted to also highlight some of the other campus web-related resources that are available to you all as site admins and content managers. And I'll kind of just go and I'll let Al talk about the accessibility stuff, since he's one of the co-chairs of the campus digital accessibility. But the things I'd really like to highlight, there's several communities of practice in here, the design community of practice, the digital accessibility, and then there's also WisWeb WordPress community of practice. And I go to all these and I always learn so much. They cover just a wide range of not only WordPress things, but just general web design things. Actually, Al, for the design community, the last one, Al and a colleague over in Do It did a really good one on color theory, and I learned it was just really well done. It was so great. But you always pick up, really great little tips on these topics that you could then, apply to your work with your own website. I don't know, Al, if you had other comments.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, and it's a great way to point out and good summary that, I mean, a lot of these groups, they're not necessarily, really getting into the technical weeds, if you will. I think they're really valuable for others that have some level of, publishing presence on campus to consider getting involved in if you have the time and are able to do so. Again, the design community will focus on things that are much more just higher level about good practices with layout and messaging to people, right? Trying to get the right level of reading comprehension, those sort of things. So definitely consider getting involved. The digital accessibility one as well. We have definitely some tracks that are built specifically for, people that are just managing their website content and not necessarily worrying about CSS or HTML from day to day. So I think they're definitely worthwhile to check out when you can. And they're relatively active. So I know that there's a design community meeting, I think coming next week, I want to say. I have to double check.
Yeah,
that's, I believe, not all about swag. So like conference, like designing physical like goods, like mugs and pens and things like that.
Swag.
Yes,
right.
So very fun to check out. And so it kind of relates to, I think, the digital production world quite a bit. So but yes, otherwise that's great. And if anyone would like, I think we'll make sure we can send this list of links out as well.
Yeah, we'll make sure the slides get sent out in the newsletter. So in the next
Excellent. With that, is there anything else people want to ask questions about quick? Otherwise, I'm going to demo some new things we've been building in the last couple of weeks that should be now available to a lot of you starting today. As we've been deploying some of these things out, in fact, right before this meeting, but these will be things that all of you can start to use on sites, and there'll be more coming. So if any other questions, feel free to jump in now. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll switch off to slides and do some quick demos. All right, so A couple things that are happening here. Now, what I have here is a little sort of an early beta version, if you will, of some of the new CALS theme as well. But these blocks are going to be available. These new interface options are available right now to either theme. One of the things that we've been doing is, as we've mentioned probably in previous sessions of this, is these are all separated out so that they now will transcend between which theme, and you don't have to redo anything as you were to change themes too. So again, we want to make sure that things, staying up to date with things and using new components are as easy as possible. So a couple of the new components that we have that are just available starting the last couple of days here, a couple of weeks here. Number one, there's a navigation pane, navigation block, if you will. The way this looks and works is there is effectively a navigation option in Gutenberg now, as you were to look through it. And this is useful for any of you that have, and we've had this request from a couple of groups where they've wanted to included a menu of some sort on the sidebar, on the top, and the left. The nice thing within Gutenberg is you can kind of put it wherever you'd like it to be. You can actually decide whether or not you want it to be horizontally oriented, like a lot of menus are, or vertically oriented. You can decide if it should be centered or left justified. And on top of that, it does support doing submenus as well. So if you look into something like this and you have a pre-established menu you've built in WordPress under maybe the appearance section, you could come in here and select that menu and it'll just automatically populate it, right? You can keep going with what you have, but it also even enables you to add custom links as well on the fly. And those custom links can even be the submenus of each particular area. So this one I think is pretty powerful. I think it's going to be one of those things that probably doesn't feel all that immediately useful to everybody unless you've already been sort of chomping at the bit to get something like this onto your site on a particular page. But for those that are looking for something like this is incredibly useful. What we're planning to use it for right now is we're looking at sites where there is an overall maybe top level navigation, but there's going to be a sub nav as well that is on the page in some way. So there's going to be a combination of options for both a manually built nav of items that you might want to make available at that lower option, that lower tier, as well as still the automatic programmatic version that you've all seen with that right-hand sidebar. So those will be available. What it means is that if you've ever been maybe frustrated or stuck with that right-hand sidebar nav in that it's sort of just always on the right, always in the upper corner, and you can't do much about it other than maybe hide it, now it'll be something that you could really change its position and integrate it much better with how your content looks and works. And it becomes a much more sort of equal playing field part of the rest of your content. The next thing that's as well new in here is search. Search is also built in, but we've made sure that there's actual full support for it. So this is a search module you could put with anywhere on the site. And of course, it's going to search, handle the same search integration you have with your site. So whether you have native WordPress search, or you have a Google module to enable the Google custom search, either way, that will enable full search functionality wherever you need to be placed on the page. This is particularly useful, I think, when you might be considering having a site that has maybe more of a dashboard feel, where the first thing you want the user to see is just a big search bar to look for what they're looking for, and then maybe have subsequent content after it. Again, part of the new sort of motive behind all these new design mechanisms is that you don't necessarily have to prescribe to the everyone has a hero image sort of website. You can really change things up a lot more. So we've also added a couple other new things. One of these is very, very new. We added an option for tabs, which there's some of you that are like, wow, it took that long. Okay, but now we have tabs, so that's a good thing. We have an option now where you could actually drop these into any part of the page and as many of these as you want, and you have tabbed content. The other thing that's important about this, and the reason we took a while to really build this with some care, was that we wanted to make sure things were accessible and that things had some extra functionality. So switching tabs automatically adds, for example, a URL parameter in the top. So if you send someone a link to this page now and they were to reload it, they're going to land here with that tab open, and it scrolls them down exactly to that content. So you can now more specifically make sure that if you have tabbed content and content is sort of buried underneath a tab, you can still find a way to link that directly for people that you want to be able to find that. Same thing goes to the accordion. The accordion as well is a block that we've had in the past, but it's gotten some nice updates. So a couple of things that'll be going on with that is that You can still build up the accordion visually within Gutenberg now, but now we enable and just have an option, and it's on by default, to make sure that users can expand and collapse all of the accordion items that you might have in one go. If you want to be able to scan all the content or do something like, a Control F or Command F and look through all the content, that's there by default. The other thing we're going to be doing with this as well is we're going to be including some additional style options as well. So as we start to work through this with the new CALS themes, there'll be some additional style options that you can take advantage of and actually apply those. So each of these, this is going to have the default style that you've probably known from some time now, but that's going to be something useful as well. One of the things that we kind of see most commonly as sort of a low-hanging fruit for a lot of groups is that there's a lot of times they're sort of under a deadline to get content onto a page somewhere. They need to publish something. And a lot of times what it means is that they get, some text linearly just laid on the page, maybe some links, and there's some opportunities there for laying out this content in a way that's a little bit nicer, a little bit easier to use or digest because it's not so overwhelming. And so considering the use of things like tabs or the accordion is a really good way to do that. So I think it's a really great consideration of that sort of thing. The next thing we have on here, and it's unfortunately it's a little bit sort of grouped with these others, if you can see it okay, is a countdown timer. Now, funny enough, I will admit we built this partially because at the time we needed something particularly for the IT professionals conference that was going on at the end of May, early June. And this particular module as well, we built. So of course, we made sure it's available right away to all of you. And it's pretty straightforward. You can basically select up in the group of blocks, the countdown timer. And there's also a countdown timer container. I'll get to that in just a moment. The countdown timer, of course, just does exactly what it sounds like. And you can kind of go in there and choose any particular date or time, and it's going to give you a specific, precise countdown to exactly when that is. The nice thing, though, is that this is, well, maybe this is beneficial if you want to help imply that, hey, there's a time deadline to doing something. This ticking clock is, by the way, a really good reminder, hopefully not to draw too much anxiety on anybody. Because I remember when the conference was getting down to the wire, we're like, ooh, that clock is a little bit rough. But getting a chance to know when something is going to be taking place or ending or starting can be really, really nice. It's a nice interactive feature for that. The other thing, though, that it does is that the timer itself is just one display, but what does it do when the timer sort of stops and starts, right? So by default, the timer just sort of goes away, right, when it gets to 0. However, you can do some other things. You can have something go to a URL so that if someone lands on the page and timers hit 0, they get pushed over to whatever URL you select. You can have just a timer go away, of course, but you can also have it hide and show content on the page. So this is where it gets a little bit more powerful and something that we envision seeing a little bit more, especially within some of our administrative spaces. And that is that you can actually decide that a particular piece of content can be revealed or hidden when the timer hits 0, right? So the idea being that you can also apply this second thing I just mentioned, this countdown timer container. And a countdown timer container on the right, you can select whether or not it does a sort of reveal or show based on its own date and time set, or based on a timer that's already on the page. And you can decide which group that is from. So when you set the timer up, you can say this is going to hide or show group number 1. And if I go to the container and say this is for group number 1, this group will now be affected by this timer. So if I want this content to show up until the time is up and then go away, that's what it's currently set to. I can have it also reveal at the time hits 0. This is particularly useful for things that are just going to be available at a certain date and time. And then at that point, you can have them show up at that point and do those sort of things. We're going to be working towards probably eventually adding this so that you can do sort of a date gap. So something on both on the start and the end for it to both show up and then go back away. This is particularly more powerful for those that have already been taking advantage of page scheduling when you publish, right? So when you publish something, you can choose the date and time it publishes at. This now lets you do it inside the content at a specific point. So maybe the whole page needs to exist all the time, but this one part of the page needs to change at a specific date and time. And that's what lets you do that without necessarily affecting all the rest of your content. One other thing to note with this as well is that you can, of course, just set up content to have its own date and time to show or reveal based on what's going on. We did use this with the conference to sort of hide the normal conference content and reveal the conference starting date content when that took place, so people then could see the button to join Zoom and jump right in, that sort of thing. It's pretty powerful, and there's a lot of things we're still working on with it, but it does a pretty sophisticated number of things that you can do. So I'd recommend taking a look at that and consider whether or not that would be something that you would like to take advantage of or use in some way. For anyone that tries to use it and has any difficulty, of course, as with any of these sort of things, please reach out to us. We can certainly help with that sort of thing and see where those things are going. There's a couple other things we're working on, and I will just sort of give you a little bit of a preview as we have some of these things starting to be available, but we'd like to kind of, I think, work out a couple of the kinks here. But for those that have used the card layout option that we've already had available, we wanted to make sure that there was an option to not just make a particular piece of text or button or heading clickable within the card, but make the entire card a clickable button by itself. So Mark and I are actually meeting today to talk about how would be the best way to do that. Right now, we currently have been testing an option to set the URL on the side for a particular card, and each card having its own URL. But doing so would effectively allow you to have sort of an entire clickable space like this. So the advantage and disadvantage of this, of course, is that if you want to have multiple things clickable within a card, you certainly wouldn't want to do this necessarily. You want to have individual links clickable. But if you did apply something like this could make it a lot easier to sort of give a overall arching navigation to a particular page, especially if you just want to call out, let's say, 3 major sections to a page. You could sort of give each one a nice card, lay the cards out in such a way, maybe with some photography, and then each one of these is just one big button the user has to click to get off to that new location. So these are a couple of the new blocks that have just been sort of getting put in place and been released. There's a lot more coming, and with each of these, we are going to be working towards also a bunch of new patterns as well. So for those that are familiar, we have a group of patterns that we have been working on here, and these have been getting slowly but surely developed into more advanced versions. Some of which are kind of just good basic layouts, things like a quadrant of cards like this. We also have a series of other ones, things like announcements we're working on as well. So if you just would like to have a nice announcement card, particularly one that maybe you'd like this announcement card to only show up at a particular date and time and then go away. These are the sort of things that are available now, patterns that have been getting added. So a new pattern group called announcements is available, and a few other patterns that have been getting added to each particular group. So with that, that's kind of a good quick overview of all the different little things that we've been starting to add over the last couple weeks here. I guess I'd take a break there. Given all the other things we've kind of talked about, I just wanted to see if there's any other major questions or thoughts. I haven't checked chat, so I should probably take a peek in case Mark's probably already addressed, I'm sure, questions there. If there's any of you that are looking towards any of this with either some curiosity on how to take advantage of this and aren't sure which way they'd use it yet, keep in mind that we'll be working on new patterns, especially some of these full page patterns where if you're devising a new page and looking for this sort of concept to be purposely built for that page, that is something they'll be working towards as well. So some of these full page patterns will be coming soon. We have a few already, of course, like the about page content, but these sort of things will help make it a lot quicker and easier to publish a specific page. Is there anything that I've shown here today that anyone would like me to kind of go into more detail on, or at least maybe clarify a little bit on? I know I kind of ran through a whole bunch of stuff kind of quick there, so.
Hey, Al, it's Nicole again.
Yeah.
Always with questions. I'm thinking of the
it's always good.
CALS commencement site. I know we want to update that ahead of December's commencement celebration. And looking at that countdown timer block, I'm thinking that's going to be a nice thing for that site in particular.
Yeah.
And my question is, like, you can see it like hiding things, and I can see things becoming unhidden, but what if you want to switch from like content A to content B at that time?
Right.
Does it do that without needing 2 countdown timers, like one countdown timer, switch from content A to content B?
Correct. Yes. So that's great question. It's something I just kind of neglected to highlight properly here. So let me go ahead and show you a little bit how you could do that. So let's say, for example, you did have one countdown timer, and this one maybe, let's say, has like, a 2-week out return time or turn time to count down to. And I'm going to just say this is content A. And what I would probably do in this case is, let's say I want content A to be there now, right? But I want it to go away and swap with content B. when the timer hits 0. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a new content timer container. And the only thing I'll call this one content B, just so it's clear which one I'm on here. And for this one, the only thing I'm going to swap is two things. Is number one, I'm going to say, hey, its time control is not independent. I'm going to make it based on the timer for group 1.
Okay.
And the other thing I'll do at the top is say to hide this until the time is up. So if I do it in this manner, so this one is hidden, this one is shown, and the difference between these two, they're both using the group 1 timer, which is what this timer is set to govern, which is group 1. That way it'll show content A now, and the moment we hit this timer hitting 0, we would suddenly see content B. So if, oops, I should update here. So if I did something like that, right now we should just see content A. Yep, so there's content A. And likewise, now here's the fun part. Can I make the timer have like 10 seconds left, right? We could kind of see that happen. It's pretty immediate. It doesn't require a refresh. So that's kind of important to note. So it just sort of happens right away. So if we did 1:48, I suppose, right? Yeah, you get to negative
PM. I guess PM.
Oh, yes, of course. Oh my gosh, yes. It's like say why it still thinks we're, and okay, number 3. I've encountered this once or twice before too, where I'm sort of setting the, let's try actually updating that. I want to see if it's actually properly updating itself. Yeah, it says it's already counted down to 0, so I might have to take a look at that. But that is something that we would have. We did this actually for the conference itself. So this is, we actually were able to successfully see it operating as we expected. So it's showing content B now because it sees the timer is past 0 at this point.
And when, if we don't need a countdown timer going negative, you can make the timer disappear too, right?
Correct. Yes.
And leave content B up, but the timer disappears. All those things. Okay.
Exactly. In fact, I could even just embed the timer with content A, and then it will get rid of itself upon that switch. Right. So that makes sense.
And can content A be like written content and photographic images? Like, is there a lot of flexibility?
Any block.
Anything you want can go in here. And so that's kind of almost like the Lego of all this. It's really entertaining or kind of fun, is that this is just, if anything, it's just sort of a little wrapper shell, and it's we allowed anything to put inside of it. So it means that the timing of a particular piece of content, you could literally grab an entire layout, especially if you've grouped it already, whether you've grouped or just had like this group of tabs, you can do that. And this might be a good point to, by the way, highlight, is you see that I have a lot of things on this page. And if you think about the task of, oh, I want to move these tabs, to be within content A right now, and how it's a little bit of a clunky thing. And I don't know if any of you have been working on the new editor yet and have experienced this, but we really, really recommend taking a look at the outline view, which is this little sort of 3 lines button at the top here. This outline view is incredibly powerful. As you can see, of course, there's a little bit of a visual hierarchy of all the things that are going on. And you can actually see this content timer container right down here. This is the one that's for A. I can actually just drag it within this space. I can say, great, now I've got tabs, these tabs within content A. And if I bump this timer back out, you can see that it goes countdown timer and then tabs. And what would happen is, as soon as this would hit 0, this would swap and you'd end up having content B, which would have the cards. So in this case, you can see, and you see a few other patterns that I also dropped in there sort of as a quick demo as well. So the idea is that as we build each of these blocks, they sort of build, they're more than the sum of their parts kind of thing, right? You can kind of start to do more and more of each one, because they're not, as you remember, Nicole, because you did a lot, I know, with the older ACF editor, is they were sort of exclusive, right? You'd kind of, if something was made, it was only made to work maybe in the left column of a 2-column area, that sort of thing. Now they're infinitely more flexible. So
yeah, it looks really great. It makes me think that when it's time to make that new CALS commencement website for December, maybe it won't be that hard. I don't know.
Yeah, well, especially I know that the last one, I think there was some interest in having more things change based on the timer. Yeah, and it was sort of like, ooh, how do we do this? And now it would just be like, oh yeah, no big deal, right?
Yeah.
Well, and
Cool.
that was sort of the, you know, I think that was the other, when Al started building this for the conference, our immediate other thing that made it that much more valuable is like, we could use this for commencement page, like, you know, so made it that much more of like, yeah, this is going to be really, and just make that whole page a lot more flexible.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
That is great. I'm gonna mute myself, but thanks for showing me around that. It makes me happy.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad to hear that'll be useful. And I see Jory in also chat had mentioned, seems like a good way to promote announcements. Yeah, that is definitely something we've been looking at very heavily. Right now, we're working on some things with administrative sites, and one of the big things we're kind of imagining is just the number of things that sort of happen at certain times of the year, right? And there's sort of a deadline to do these things or submit these things, and just both the power of promoting something that's coming up, that's new, and having that change the page, as well as something that's maybe helping drive a little sense of urgency, right? It's one thing to say that, oh, the deadline for this form is July 11th or something. But sometimes seeing a live countdown to remind you that time keeps moving, you might want to do this now, might not be bad thing to consider. So there's some really interesting things I think you can do with this. And I know we also have some more blocks as well coming. One of the things that, really kind of ties in with the WIS.edu redesign, as we talked about earlier. If all of you have been potentially maybe to the brand at WIS.edu website before, and they have some wonderful resources here, of course, that are available to everybody on campus, but sometimes it's not always really evident on how to use these things. One of the things we're doing with a couple of the new blocks we're working on as well right now is going to be making these things more available. So if you looked at things like the design toolkit and you see things like these brand elements, as well as these icons that are produced, these are things, there's going to be a specific icon and illustrations, probably maybe do 2 blocks for those, but good ways to be able to select these illustrations and make certain color and applications. So if you want to take advantage of having some nice iconography that maybe goes well with your design, these things will also be sort of prescribed in patterns to give suggestions to folks if they want to use these things. But just having more of these design elements sort of easily available to sort of call upon would be great. So again, going back to another project I think Nicole will remember for sure is the current CALS that was to you about page. That was a great effort to do that, but we kind of got stuck in a space where it wasn't easily updatable. And that's something that, because of the complexity of the design and the use of some of the graphics. And once again, this will be something now, especially also even the placement of this sort of navigation too, right? Again, things that will now be much more easily adjustable and available to do for anybody within the editor. So we look forward to, we're doing a lot of big projects right now that revolve around the need for these new components. So I think all of you should probably expect some pretty rapid development of new blocks as they get introduced, just knowing that we'll have to be doing that ourselves anyway. So I know that by the time we hit, August, September, I'm sure there'll be a lot of new blocks and patterns to talk about, and I'm sure we'll probably just have a couple that we'll at least broadcast out via email, just for those that are just to be up to speed on those things as they become available. But yes, with that, we're almost at time. Are there any other thoughts or questions? Sounds like I think most people have gotten a good sense of things. We have a couple other minor things we'll be working on that will be to improve the ones that you already see here. So again, I think my own critique of these things is we'd like to make these things look and work a little bit better, and be more evident. The hope is that more and more of the look of the page will be more evident from looking at this content rather than having to hit update and go preview it, right? We want that the design within the editor space to feel, again, more consistent with those sort of things. So I thank you so much for joining us today and getting a chance to kind of see some of these things. We're excited to share them and hopefully make more of these things available to everybody. So any other thoughts, things we need to add? I think I should probably make sure just to reiterate for folks. the slides you had here, Mark. So Gutenberg ramp.
Yeah.
If you don't see the Gutenberg editor, it's probably because your site or site owner at one point requested to leave the classic editor up for now, which is a plugin option that we have here. It's very easy to change between the classic editor and this new editor. So just let us know if you can't see the new editor, if you just see something that looks a little bit more like this particular slide. Feel free to write to us at websupport@CALS, and we can help you take care of that. And then, of course, as always, just make sure to reach out to us, and we'll look forward to trying to get together again near the end of summer.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us. And we'll stick around here for a few minutes if anybody does have any more questions. But thanks and enjoy your day.